For the second time during current Barrie Mayor Alex Nuttall's tenure, the city has made national headlines for the wrong reasons related to homelessness. This time, following the brutal killing of two innocent encampment residents. Previously, Barrie drew national attention when the city attempted to penalize people for providing food and other essential services to those experiencing homelessness. After hundreds of people gathered outside City Hall 2 years back to protest against these bylaws, City was forced to withdraw them. And now, the site of the murders, the Flat Rock encampment near Victoria Street, is closed due to the environmental and public safety concerns. However, the housing and homelessness crisis has only worsened since. Simcoe Community Media is currently visiting various encampments and speaking with Barrie residents from all walks of life, including encampment residents, community leaders, politicians, activists, and healthcare experts. Our goal is to better understand what led to this crisis, whether this could have been prevented, what steps are needed to provide adequate housing and support, and whether similar tragedies could occur again if current policies remain unchanged.
Support, not criminalizing. As my shirt says, decriminalize survival. Stop paying people to do sweeps, stop paying more police officers to do patrols where they're just hounding people, and start giving it to trauma-informed therapists. Start giving it to programs that are truly trying to help people deal with the root cause of things. And people don't just wake up one day and decide, you know what? This is what my life's gonna be. No, it is a series of things that go on. And if we have more supports to help people within the series of things that go on, this is different for everybody, but having more supports along that way would make it so that people aren't so broken and hurt and traumatized. And hurt people. So instead of giving more money to people to hurt people, why don't we do supports? How do we heal? Put this money into supports that heal.
At a recent executive committee meeting, Barrie Council and staff addressed the closure of the encampment following a police investigation that allowed the city to step in. Officials admitted cleanup will cost millions with significant environmental and public safety health risks identified at the site, including waste near waterways. Of the 80 to 100 people previously at the encampment, only 6 accepted shelter spaces, leaving many to move to other areas across the city.
And really, the impetus for it was the police investigation, which created a specific scenario. And I do think that city staff and frankly the county, who once they understood the scope and the gravity of the situation, have really stepped up in a meaningful way. The uptake, and I'm going to answer questions not yet asked, but the uptake on, we had to basically confirm we had up to 80 or 100 rooms. And I think as of our meeting this morning, we had 6 individuals that had taken the county up on those rooms.
Council members voiced frustration over systematic failures, highlighting gaps in housing, health responses, and environmental protection. Some called for long-term solutions such as rent-geared income housing and a stronger framework for encampment near sensitive areas. Mayor Nuttall proposed a third-party external review to investigate the incident, while Council acknowledged that current policies, weak provincial support, and limited local resources leave the city without effective tools to prevent similar crises. After talking to several community members, health experts, the city's explanations for its handling of the encampment drew criticism as several claims did not hold up under scrutiny. Officials argued they could not act until police cleared the site or until adequate shelter was confirmed. Yet, smaller encampments had been addressed without police intervention, and the county was able to rapidly assemble shelter spaces once pressed. Charter rights were cited as barriers to enforcement, but Council largely ignored parallel charter obligations to safeguard public health and the environment.
The problem or the solution, however you look at it, both incorporate charter rights and freedoms. And, freedom of mobility is one of those charter rights and freedoms. And so we as a body can look after our land, which requires a whole bunch of other things that you just heard from Mr. Prowse on. But what we can't do is legislate an end to homelessness. And it's a very, very difficult line to walk properly where you're abiding by the provincial regulations and laws and doing what we know is the right thing to do because of various interpretations of those charter rights and those laws via the judiciary.
Despite severe risks, the refusal of the health unit to assess conditions on site went unchallenged, and no system was in place to track why shelter offers were declined, leaving responses reactive rather than informed. Finally, staff admitted that there is no framework for prioritizing encampments near sensitive areas and claimed it was too early for lessons learned, even though this was city's second major encampment crisis, pointing to deeper gaps in preparedness and long-term planning.
This is the second, if I'm remembering correctly, significant encampment-related response we've been involved in, the last one being Barrie Park. And just the activating piece of this intervention was the police interaction between the action that was initiated at Barrie, which I don't believe was necessarily because of illegal something significant with police, or was it?
Your recollection is correct, Councillor Harris. Barrie Park was initiated by the city. Mr. Schmidt and his team meet with the county and the outreach workers, etc., as part of what I'll call a table. I think you meet every week or every 2 weeks. There is an ongoing list of encampments in the city. We're not unaware of them. What the team does is they effectively triage them, both from locational challenges. Is it near a school? Is it in an open park? Is it in an area that is going to cause concern over safety and things like that? Part of that discussion includes the county confirming that they have the capacity to take on the unhoused if we have to move them out in conjunction with the police. Barrie Park was a large encampment, but certainly not in the scope and scale of this encampment. But we were effective in getting the county to put together enough available, appropriate housing units, beds, and then the city worked to secure the park, given our legislative authority.
As part of this effort, our volunteer civic journalist, Christine Naylor, sat down with Ash Pinu, street outreach worker with Ryan's Hope. Following is their interview and coverage of the executive committee meeting.
Hi, Christine here with Simcoe Community Media. Today we are in Barrie Park, and I am sitting here to chat with Ash, a street outreach volunteer with Ryan's Hope, and we're just talking as part of our documentary on the housing and homelessness crisis in Barrie. So can you tell me, Ash, why you picked this place to do this interview?
I picked Barrie Park because almost a year ago to this date, I was here with my fellow advocates documenting an illegal eviction of the encampment that was here, and it just seemed like the perfect place to do this interview, to talk about the displacement of, to talk about what happens when you do an encampment sweep. The horrors that and I will call them horrors because they were horrors, that we witnessed here when they did the encampment sweep of Barrie last year was so inhumane and cruel, and I'm still trying to recover from it, and I thought this would be the perfect place to talk about these issues.
So how did you feel when you came here? I know we walked through the park together and seeing it so empty, and like you talked about having like some flashbacks and on that. So how was that for you being here now after what you witnessed the last time that you were here?
It's almost eerie, I guess. You know, it's supposed to be this beautiful trail, beautiful place where people can come and enjoy it, but there's almost echoes, I guess, is a good way to put it. It echoes what happened here. You can see it in the trees that have been that were cut down because they tried to make it not safe and private for people to take shelter under. So yeah, they've cut down multiple trees. and just the energy as well. You know, last year before they started doing the eviction before they started the sweep and doing the eviction of Bursey, the energy in here was beautiful. You know, the sense of community was powerful, very powerful, and people were looking out for each other, doing the best that they could to keep things clean and keep things sanitary, without the help of, you know, anybody else. You know, we have our toilets, we have dumpsters, we have garbage pickups and stuff like that. And something as simple as supporting encampments would make the biggest difference. And that's one of the reasons why I chose this place, because they swept it, but now it just is deserted. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I don't know how to put it into words, except for the fact that the horrors echo, and this was a place where people were finding safety and community in people and helping each other out. And instead of collectively helping each other out as a city, as a community, as the community of Barrie, they were swept under the rug. And it's the same thing that's happening again. And yeah, being here is, it's haunting.
Yeah. So you spent a night here with the people during before the actual evictions started to progress, right? Can you talk about what that experience was like for you, spending a night in the encampment?
Yeah, it was actually kind of funny because I was working and I got off work late, so I got here around like 10 o'clock and I brought pizza, you know, expecting to be hanging out with everybody and talking about, you know, what's going on and just getting to know each other, being in community as we are. And I got here and everyone was asleep. Nobody was awake. It was quiet. Everyone was asleep. I was kind of disappointed, not gonna lie, because I was looking forward to being in community with my friends, but everyone was asleep. It was quiet and it was so peaceful. So once I sat down and was like, okay, getting settled, it was one of the most peaceful nights I've ever experienced in my life, camping out here with my community.
So it was just like camping, if you were camping, you know, like at a campground or...
It was more peaceful than that. A campground's louder. But yeah.
And do you want to share the experience about reading a comment online about the wild party that was happening here while you were there? And
yes, that was funny. We received a comment because we were posting about it, as us advocates do. Awareness is very important to us. So we were posting about it while we were here, and someone commented on our post while we were here talking about how it's so loud right now. They're down there partying. It's so loud. I can't sleep. And we were hearing crickets. So it was a prime example of most of the noise that you hear people talking and spreading about the homeless community, about encampments, is just that. It's noise. It's not true. It's not true. And that comment was the perfect example of that, because we were literally sitting here in this park while somebody was trying to say that it was loud and rowdy, and we were able to sit here and be like, actually look, you hear the crickets. Can you hear that? Because that's what peace sounds like.
okay, thanks for that. So you're talking about like the violence of the encampment eviction and stuff like that, and kind of having some flashbacks when you're walking through. You have trauma from that. What do you think that it did to the encampment residents when you were witnessing and watching? Can you tell us some of the things that you witnessed and you documented that happened during that eviction?
The first things that come to mind are the third party that is hired by the city to come in and do the grunt dirty work the most. Those men that were hired to come in and do it were cold, and they were very heartless, and you could see that on their face. Watching them rip people's only belongings that they have down and throw them in a dumpster like it was nothing. I just couldn't help but keep asking everybody around, how do you sleep at night? Like, how do you sleep at night? Another thing that I have a hard time sleeping at night myself with is just the fact that there were so many police officers and quote unquote outreach workers that were lying, just straight up lying. Like, lying to people's faces, lying through their teeth, and trying to convince people to leave on their own accord because that's all they could do. And they're manipulating and lying, and the games that were being played was just infuriating, because I don't want to play these games. No one wants to play these games, but yet we're out here doing it. That was infuriating for me. I have lots of faces burned into my mind of people that were trying to say that they are out here caring and trying to help people, but are actively doing the opposite of that. Like, stop lying to yourself, stop lying to people, just stop lying. That one really, really, really bothered me, because there was close friends of ours in this park, staying in this park, that were almost being coerced out because they were being lied to that they would have a place where they could stay together, or they'd have a place where they could stay for more than one night, and we know that. So one of the most important things for me during my time here last year was actively pointing out that they don't have any help. There is no help. They're what I call illusions of help, to shut the public up. We need to stop with the illusions of help. That was one of the things that really, really got me while I was here. We got to stop with the illusions of help.
So you were one of the advocates. There was a lot of people here during that process of the evictions the first few days before they closed the park. But there's a lot of outreach workers and that. You received a trespass notice, and others were allowed to continue to come and be in the park, even though your organization was one of the organizations that was actually requested by the people in the encampment that they wanted support from. You weren't allowed to be in here. Why do you think that is?
Oh, quite simple. We were showing what was happening. We were showing what was happening, as well as informing the residents of their rights. That's one of the biggest things that they count on when they do sweeps and things like this, is people not knowing their rights. They were counting on the encampment residents here to just leave on their own accord because they were scared of being arrested, or they were scared of this or scared of that. Our presence showed them that they had rights, showed them that they do matter, showed them that, you know, people do care and you don't have to do this. And they didn't like that. So they closed the park and tried to kick us out. Gave us those little pieces of paper. I crumpled mine up. And yeah, it was a scare tactic. And thankfully, with the way that Barrie is set up, it didn't work, because we were able to still have eyes on people during it all. That trespassing order was a joke. It was a very bad joke, a bad scare tactic. They're trying to convince people that, you know, you can't be out here. You can't do what's right. Don't do what's right. You have to do what you're told. So whenever there is people out there showing that, shining a light on it, as I say, they try and dim that. They try and shut that down. And that's all that trespassing order was about, because the park was not closed. And if the park was closed, we weren't at the park. We were here protesting. We were there for the same reasons they were there. We were only there because they were there. So it was infuriating, to say the least. And I'm proud to say that it didn't shake me the way that they thought it would.
So have you had conversations with the residents afterwards, the ones that were here and had their belongings just thrown away and discarded, and that were displaced from this community, which, like you described what the community was like, about how it impacted them having to leave and the way that they were made to leave here?
I've had a couple conversations with people ever since. After it all went down, me and my advocacy group, we were made it a point to keep making sure and checking in on the residents, because they were not allowed to leave. They knew if they left their tent that the ones that we were able to protect, that they would have all of their stuff stolen with. So within those interactions, I got to talk to a couple of the people that were here during it all. And honestly, to say the least, they lost all of their stuff. They couldn't get any of their stuff. One of the gentlemen that I talked to had a knee brace that was special for him, and he was told that it was going to be put in a storage unit and that he would be able to have access to it. That did not happen. He ended up losing all of his stuff. The people that did trust and say, okay, sure, I'll use the storage unit. Sure, I'll take your illusions of help. They were out on the street within the next couple of days. You know, it was exactly what these people had nowhere to go, and they were saying it. They had nowhere to go. They had nothing left, and they had to start from scratch again. And not only that, not even just starting from scratch, but then having to deal with the trauma that comes from being treated like dirt, being treated like you're less than human, like you don't matter because you don't have a house. When in the first place, the only reason why this is as big as it is because of the 1% hoarding everything. And people like Alex Nuttall that are constantly pushing stigma out into the public that is causing people to look at their neighbor like, nah, gross. And when at the end of the day, we're all human beings, we're all out here. And one of the most famous things all of us advocates like to say is you are so much closer to becoming homeless than you are to becoming a billionaire.
So you heard about the recent displacement of people at the Flat Rock encampment. I know that you did regular outreach there and you got to know a lot of the residents there really well. What are your thoughts about what's happening there?
My thoughts.
Your feelings.
My thoughts and feelings on that. Honestly, I'm just so overwhelmed, to say the least. I haven't even fully processed everything that's going on over there for the main fact of we keep doing the same thing over and over and over again and then expecting a different result. Like, that is the literal definition of insanity, and that's what's happening right now. And I'm not gonna lie, it's driving me a little insane. But no, my heart is absolutely broken. Just driving here today to do this interview, and I'm looking around and tents everywhere. So, Alex, what did you solve? What did you do? Because at the end of the day, you've just made things so much worse. You've displaced people. People are now away from their communities, away from people that were actually helping each other, maybe helping each other get on their feet for all you know. Instead of, supporting people, you are further traumatizing people.
So the reason that Flat Rock was actually closed and down and people had to leave there was because it has been now declared an environmental hazard site. And this happened after the police had closed the area for a police investigation that resulted in finding out that there was 2 tragic murders that and 2 victims of the unsheltered community that had their lives lost. And so that's how we came to this situation where up to 100 people, they've said, have been displaced. And the mayor was saying that, how did it get to this point? Because he's like, now I read this today that he was saying that the beach advisories of there being bacterial levels in the beach is caused by the encampment. And his thing is he wants to do with 0 encampments in Barrie. And like you said, you saw more tents now out in the open than you've ever seen before. Do you think we can have a 0 tolerance to encampments without housing or without...
No, that's just dumb. Honestly, that's just dumb. And there's not another word for it. You're going to displace people and say, we don't want any homeless, but you have no homes for them. There's nowhere for people to go. Build a tiny city. Tiny houses, tiny city, tiny houses. Like, that's literally it. We've been trying to get Alex to do something like that. Even as simple as where they are clearing it out right now. That was one of the most organized, protected, community-built encampments that I've ever seen. They do really help each other out over there. And something as simple as putting a porta potty there would have solved this completely. We would not have gotten to the point where it is. So yeah, one of the main things is don't get it twisted.
And was that something that was ever brought up to the
multiple
mayor
times.
and the city?
Multiple times. I can't even count how many council meetings that I was at myself, let alone other advocates advocating for the fact of you need to support people. Supporting people is how you manage this problem, not manage this problem, it's how you solve this problem. But they don't want to solve the problem, and they're proving it with the encampment sweeps, because if they wanted to solve the problem, they wouldn't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. So at the end of the day, you know, the person we need to be pointing fingers at here for all of this is Alex. Alex was told multiple times by multiple people in multiple organizations how to handle this, how to deal with it. There's multiple cities. Kitchener alone is doing better than we are. There's multiple examples. There is multiple proof, multiple studies, so much that proves and supports what advocates have been saying to help and support encampments and, you know, to actually be tackling this issue and solving it, not putting a Band-Aid over it, not using it so that they can continue to do whatever the heck they want to do while they put all their blame on the most vulnerable and everyone just falls for it. So that's one of the reasons why I am here doing this, is people need to stop falling for it. We need to just love each other. It comes down to that simple fact. We just need to love each other.
So, as an advocate that has spent a lot of time in encampments and supporting people in encampments, what would support look like? Because, like, obviously we don't have housing to house everybody right now. So people need to live somewhere, and that's why encampments exist. But what could have been done by the mayor and council to have supported the people better in the encampment so we didn't get to where we got?
Easily leave Flat Rock alone, because they were doing amazing in the sense of leaving them alone by not bothering them and doing encampments sweeps. I'm going to just get back to your question and answer it simple in the sense of the things that we could have done to support these encampments and how we can do these is, again, porta potties. That stops the sanitation issue, and that stops people having to use the bathroom wherever they can find it. Because I can tell you one thing, people don't want to be doing that. It's not dignifying. People want a toilet, so give them a toilet, and they'll use a toilet. Having the certain encampments where people, because there's been some certain spots in Barrie that would have worked perfectly for this, to let the encampments be and support them. Go and actually have outreach workers be able to know where people are so they can connect and meet with people and bring services to them and help people stay alive until they're ready to actually recover and make that decision. Supporting people by having the encampments on garbage routes. That would stop the garbage getting everywhere and people thinking, oh, the homeless are dirty, the homeless are gross, blah, 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 blah. Every encampment that I have been to, every encampment that I have been to, there is one spot that is designated for the garbage, and everyone tries their absolute best to follow that. But there's only so much you can do when you have no support. Support is everything. So by supporting these encampments with porta potties, garbage routes, being like a one-stop where people know to go to be able to help people, it's a community. It also gives people that safety in numbers. They protect each other. They help keep each other also making better choices because you're holding each other accountable. And also at the end of the day, it would be a way to bridge the gap between the housed and the unhoused, because you would have a spot where people could go and communicate and build these relationships and actually solve these issues and help people and heal, truly heal. But Alex doesn't want to heal Barrie. So none of these things have happened.
So you were talking about like having, outreach workers go to encampments and, support people. And that's something, I'm an advocate and a frontline worker as well. And that's something that makes it so much easier when you're going to an encampment and you're going to connect with 50 people and you know where they are because that's their home, that's their community.
Build a relationship with them.
Can you talk about the challenge of when an encampment is displaced? Of finding people, of supporting them, what happens? What happens to that community once?
It falls apart. In simple terms, it falls apart. And it's so disheartening and heartbreaking to us because, these are our friends. These are people we connect with. We build a relationship with. We're coming up with plans. We're figuring things out together. And then all of a sudden, they come in, they do the sweep, and everyone is traumatized again. Everyone has no idea what they're doing. They're uprooted. Like, just imagine one day you're just living your life, you come in, and then next thing you know, the whole rug is ripped out from underneath you. You have nothing. You have nowhere to go, no family, no help, no support. And you're expected to be okay and continue to try and do things and better yourself. That makes no sense. That makes no sense. And you're cruel if you think that somebody else can do that, because you wouldn't be able to do that. It breaks my heart because we can't find our friends. We have no idea where they are. We go almost sometimes months, years without even knowing if they're okay. That alone is just takes a toll. And again, that community that was built, that community that was actually helping people heal and find their way, just goes away. And now advocates that have been connecting with people and building those relationships, like I say, coming up with plans, figuring things out, helping people heal, have just lost that connection completely. And sometimes we never find them again, for one reason or the next, you know what I mean? And it's not helping anything. All we're doing is harming people. And the encampment sweeps are a special kind of cruel because of that. You actually have people that are connecting and building those bridges and truly healing and truly fixing this problem, truly actually adding things to a solution. And you come in and you shake them all up, and everyone gets dispersed. Everyone gets pulled apart from each other. Nobody knows where they are. There's no form of contact anymore. And it's just, oh, all right, here we go again. And it just keeps going and going and going and going and going and going. And I don't have any patience or understanding left for anybody that believes that this is our way out of this, that this is how we solve this. And it's people like Alex that need to get out of the way and stop doing the things that he's been doing since he's been in office. Apparently he's supposed to be from government housing. Well, he should act like it. Remember where he came from, if that's true. Yeah, you know what I mean? The things that he's done and things that he's doing, he's one face to the problem that is causing it. At the end of the day, at the end of the day, we just need to love each other and stop buying into the hate, stop buying into the stigma, stop listening to these people in suits that are telling you that the person who is struggling to just survive is the reason why you have all the problems you have. Like, stop. Just stop. Please. Just love each other. Like, that's literally it. Where it's all just trying to build community out here. And these sweeps are killing everybody. Like physically, mentally, solely, like we're not doing anything to help anything with this.
Well, yeah, it's been proven that when there is an encampment sweep and people are displaced from their community, it actually puts them more at risk. It puts them more at risk for overdose because they're not watching over each other. Puts them more at risk for violence, suicide, so many different things, right? And that's one of the things, is there is so much stigma that is actually so incorrect, and it's just used to fuel fear that the homeless are responsible for all these problems in society. And so the answer is we hire more police, and that's going to fix the problem. It makes people think that possibly that like their community is going to be safer because the police are there's more police on patrol and stuff like that. But it's actually statistically proven that more police in a community does not make a community safer, right? So
supports make a community safer, mental health.
That's what I was gonna. What would you say makes a community safer, and what would be a better investment of funds rather than this approach that our current mayor and council have been taking?
Honestly, more like support, not criminalizing. As my shirt says, decriminalize survival. Stop paying people to do sweeps, stop paying more police officers to do patrols where they're just hounding people, and start giving it to trauma-informed therapists. Start giving it to programs that are truly trying to help people deal with the root cause of things. And People don't just wake up one day and decide, you know what, this is what my life's gonna be. No, it is a series of things that go on. And if we have more supports to help people within the series of things that go on, this is different for everybody, but having more supports along that way would make it so that people aren't so broken and hurt and traumatized. And, you know, hurt people hurt people. So instead of giving more money to people to hurt people, why don't we do supports? How do we heal? Put this money into supports that heal. I can't really think of a specific thing at the top of my head because we need to build it. We need to build something new here. You know, we need to actually be working together as a society, collectively shifting our focus from criminalizing and hating and blaming each other to how do we help each other? How do I help this situation? So putting more money into things that do that. I'm an advocate and I got a lot of my own stuff going on, so I can't give you guys specific details. I have yet to actually see any organization or any place that truly does that. That is like a government run type of thing or whatever, you know? The only place that really puts their boots to the ground and doesn't just talk the talk but walks the walk is Ryan's Hope. And I haven't met any other organization or anybody else that works that way. You know, so by supporting initiatives and organizations and groups like Ryan's Hope and true activists and true mental health services, having more trauma-informed therapists, trauma-informed people on crisis calls and stuff like that would make a world of a difference. It's just about switching from hate to support. But yeah, there's an example I kind of found out of me there or whatever, is literally just putting a trauma-informed care therapist on crisis calls, you know? So you have somebody there who's going to be able to see the person as a person, not just see that, okay, this person's a problem, that they see the person.
So the mayor's narrative has been, since he took office, and even I think during his election campaign, that the homeless are responsible for all the problems, and that the people that use drugs and people that are homeless are violent, and they're the ones that are committing all the crimes in our community. Some advocates fear that these murders are going to be used to further demonize people that are homeless and say, see, they're violent. This is what the result of allowing people to live outside and live under these conditions. And do you share that fear?
I guess it's not really a fear, more as they're already doing it. They're already using that as an excuse to be displacing people over at Flat Rock right now. You know, like they have it all shut down and doing it all, but it started, of course, needed to be handled, but it's already being used as a vendetta against the homeless. And see, look, there you go, this and that, this is why, blah 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 blah. It's already being used. So yeah, my hope is that with all the advocacy work that people are doing and all of the information that's out there, that people will make their own minds, make up their own minds, and realize that the homeless was the victims in this situation.
So getting back to what you were talking about, the trauma and having a trauma-informed therapist, 2 people were murdered, brutally murdered, that were a member of this community. And it's affected this community deeply. It's affected, people in ways that, I guess haven't really been spoken about. Often when there's a trauma in a community, like some type of event like this, the city will bring in counselors to speak to people that have been affected by that crisis, like the family, the friends, people that, were part of these persons' support network. Do you think that the city should be providing that type of service? And why do you think they're not?
Yeah, I think the city should be providing that type of service among a lot of others, and they're not because they deem the homeless as less than. They deem the homeless as they're not human beings, and that's a narrative that I will fight till it's not a narrative anymore. Not only are they not being offered their supports, they are being further traumatized because this community just went through this horrific thing. And instead of, again, supports and allowing advocates to come in and trauma-informed therapists to come in and, be there for people and support people, what are they doing? They have the whole thing fenced off. Nobody can get in or out, and they are sweeping people out. They are displacing people. Who knows what they're doing behind there because they don't have us there with the cameras on them showing them. And I fear for what's happening behind those fences because I just know what they were trying to do here with us actually being here already. So not only are they not giving them support, but they are actively traumatizing them more with this sweep. Like, it's cruel. It's cruel. So yeah, they definitely should. And
do you have any final thoughts or
as like a closer, I'm probably just as like a plea, almost an ask, I guess, for anybody who sees this, to just love each other more. That's how we get through this. That's how we figure this out, is love and loving each other. And my hope is just for anybody who sees that they can come to that conclusion that the homeless are not the problem, they are the victims.
We will try to move through this with both speed, but also with the appropriate amount of time given to the subject matter at hand. There are no items for discussion on tonight's agenda, and we're going to go right into the number 2, which is strategic plan updates, encampments. You'll recall that the last executive committee meeting that we'd asked for this to be more of a standing item going forward, and there's been quite a lot of work being done on this over the last 6 weeks. And so I want to actually turn it over to our Chief Administrative Officer. Is there anything you'd like to say before, obviously the memo is out, but is there anything you'd like to say before questions come flying your way?
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I was leaning towards
Any
no.
word you say can and will be used against you in a court of law.
I think we weren't entirely sure whether we were going to be able to put the memo together for council, but we have. I think it speaks for itself, and I'm sure there are questions which I'm happy to speak to, but perhaps that's a better use of time instead of me regurgitating what's already documented in front of council. So maybe we can just turn it over to questions if that works for you, and I'll attempt to field them or defer to my team as required.
Okay, so before we go into questions, and I know some will probably have questions, some rules of engagement here. There is still an active police investigation going on. If you're going to ask about the police investigation, don't, and focus only on that which we around this table are responsible for, which is to work with the land that we have, work with our partners like the county that are deemed to be in charge of the services needed for those who are living in encampments, and we can go forward from there. So I'll open to the floor. Does anyone want to start? Councillor Rima, and then Councillor Brent Hamilton.
Sure, just to get it started. The question that I have is that land owned by the city or is it owned privately?
I believe that the lands that are adjacent to the creek, Diamonds Creek, are all in the possession of the city that we were talking about with the province. Is that correct, Mr. Brown?
Mayor Nuttall, yes. So there's a series of properties. I think it's fair to say that they're all in the possession of the city.
Thank you.
And do we have an estimate of what the cleanup cost is going to be at this point?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to members of committee, I would say no. If I was asked to ballpark, I think I would offer that it's probably going to be in the millions of dollars. We don't know at this point what funding may or may not be available, either in partnership with the county or through the province. And I would also offer that, the cost that we speak to, we certainly are itemizing, but the county carries a significant cost on their own as the service manager for this. So the social services, the motels, the outreach, all of that is actually paid for by the county. The city really owns the security and the cleanup of the site itself.
Thank you, Councillor Reitman. I'm now going to go to Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, and through you. First, I want to compliment the staff and say thank you for getting us this memo. I think this is very, helpful information, and I recognize this was probably a challenging situation, and a lot of moving parts that are still occurring between the city and the county and the province stepping in, the police. But I guess from my perspective, it's just looking at some of the pictures that were provided in the memo and in the state that this area was in. And the cost that it's going to take, but the safety concerns for the people who were living there, to people in the surrounding area. How do we prevent something like this from happening in the future? And what perhaps can we take away from this? And I don't want to say to deal with other encampments, but there are other encampments across the city. And I understand there's, challenging with shelter space, but this is just, it's unacceptable, right? And on many, many fronts. But I was floored when I saw these pictures and the real safety concerns for people living there, but surrounding people, and just for the city, the way the land's treated. The environmental impact. All of these are significant. And I hope there's a lesson learned. I hope there's a takeaway here. I hope the county, after the immediate cleanup is done, is going to look at how we prevent this. I'm not sure what the city's role in that, but I hope the city can at least encourage the county and encourage the province to be looking at this, what can be done, because we cannot have this happening again. And I know it is, maybe it's just smaller degrees, but I know this encampment's been in place for quite a long time. And I was even told, don't go there by yourself. There's safety concerns, there's a lot happening there. Why did we let this go? Why did the county let this go? So maybe CAO Prowse, it's to you in terms of what is the city's role going forward to make sure this doesn't happen again.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Hamilton and committee. I think if I backed up just a little bit, and I think I probably have been remiss in not recognizing Rebecca James Reed and Jeff Schmidt, who inherited this last week while I was traveling, and did yeoman's work. And Rebecca has been voluntold into the position of coordinating this over the last almost 2 weeks now, and we hope to get her summer leave soon. But she's done a remarkable job on a very complex file. So certainly the city was aware of this sites really. The challenge for the city, as members of council are certainly well aware, is when we deal with an encampment, because of both legislation and rules of the courts, one of the first things we need to be able to confirm is that there is adequate housing available through our service manager, that being the county. This has been part of Mr. Schmidt's discussion for months now with the county, so it's not new. The size and scope, this site we believe housed between 40 and 60 people, I think, at last count. Is that correct, Rebecca?
That's the number of people who are currently living on the site that have been given the trespass notices. There was probably an additional 40 people on the site that was subject to the police investigation, which is now vacant, that site.
Thank you. So you're dealing with potentially 80 to 100 people. So the first bridge we have to cross is we have to confirm through our service manager that we would have upwards of 100 rooms that are appropriate and adequate for those individuals before we can move them out of an encampment. That has been a dead end for the city, as the county as a service manager has been unable to provide and confirm that housing. So that is the starting block, because many people wonder, why haven't we taken action first on this? That is the bridge we could not cross. What was different about this approach was the police investigation required them to control the property and move out the individuals that were in the property. They do that through their own purposes, and they don't ask for rooms and they don't ask for the city's permission. We were served with a search warrant. They closed off the site and they conducted their investigation, and some of that work is still ongoing. But when they were turning the site back to the city, vacant, but in terrible condition, we were faced with a number of things. As owners of the property, we've got public safety concerns, and with the site being vacant, that presented to us both a window and a challenge, because the former tenants would surely move back into the site and reoccupy the site without us being able to clean it up. Mayor Nuttall was certainly instrumental in demon dialing on his phone to raise awareness at the province to get additional support and oversight from the Ministry of the Environment. We called in the health unit. Frankly, they declined to show up, I think well, they answered our call. They opted not to show up on site. Ministry of the Environment did show up on site, and they supported our position after a couple of iterations of discussions, which is the site is unsafe for human beings. That effectively triggered an emergency with the service manager, that being the county. That emergency unlocks additional funding and abilities, I believe, through the county. So they were able to cobble together, I think they had at least 60 odd rooms that they could confirm for the city were adequate and appropriate. So then we could start working through the triage with them for the residents or former residents of this land. And that's a critical piece for the city to be able to action encampments. So because it was effectively an emergency, it allowed the city to proceed in that manner with the county. As members of council are aware, we activated 29 Sperling as an emergency rest area. The county activated their Tiffin site as a triage, and I'm going to call it emergency rest area. But I think they also had, 10 beds on site if they needed them. All of that had to be in place before we could effectively close off the site to attempt to reoccupy it with the support of fencing, security, Barrie Police, paid duties, and the social workers and outreach. So it's a very complex and fluid situation. And I didn't want to belabor the point, but I think it's important for the public and members of council to understand how complex it is to deal with these types of situations. And in fact, we still would not be in a position to have addressed it or even attempted to address it if not for the police investigation, which initiated the securing of the site and the removal of the residents there. It's how we dealt with the next 2,700 steps, which really comes back to the city as the owner of the property. So I hope that gives some color to it. And certainly, Councillor Hamilton, I think we have learned some things from it. But the reality is, we are in a housing crisis. The unhoused in our city are difficult. Sorry, I'm searching for the words to make sure I use the correct vernacular. It is difficult to provide the supports. I think if I'm speaking for the county as a service manager, I think they would tell you today that they lack the funding and the resources, and certainly the city lacks both the control and the funding to provide those resources. So the system is not strong. We see it every single day. I know you hear about it every single day. But this is going to be a complex site with an incredibly complex problem, and really the impetus for it was the police investigation, which created a specific scenario. And I do think that city staff and frankly the county, who once they understood the scope and the gravity of the situation, have really stepped up in a meaningful way. The uptake. And I'm going to answer questions not yet asked, but the uptake on, we had to basically confirm we had up to 80 or 100 rooms. And I think as of our meeting this morning, we had 6 individuals that had taken the county up on those rooms. We had a couple that were visiting the Tiffin site, and we've had, as of this morning at least, 0 at Sperling. So you can see that when we are required by law to create this support system and expand it and invest in it, but the reality, for 100 good reasons, I'm sure, for these individuals who are unhoused, they're not able or willing to move into it. So if there was 100 people on this site, we've accounted for effectively 6. There's 94 people who are living rough, living in the streets, who have simply migrated because of the work going on the site. So it is just very complex, very challenging. We have, I think, already learned lessons from it. But we'll have, sadly, more opportunity to learn lessons from this site, because I believe the cleanup will probably be going on for months. Sorry, that's a very long answer to a short question, and I apologize.
Councillor Ellis, I've seen you, but we're going to continue with Councillor Hamilton till...
Thank you. Through you, I'll be quick, and I appreciate the lengthy explanation. I think all those points were helpful, and I was going to ask about the uptake in terms of the space that was provided, so I appreciate that too. I just wonder, as you said, the whole impetus behind this was the police investigation, right? And then understanding the safety concerns, environmental concerns. I guess I'd be pushing back to the county to say, how do we now assess the other encampments that don't have police investigations to determine their environmental impact, their safety concerns? Because I'd hate to be reactive in all of these situations. I think we need to be proactive. In terms of 6 individuals out of the potential 80 that are taking advantage of the shelter offered, I mean, I guess I don't have words for that right now that I can probably say. I think that is extremely disheartening. I would love to dive into that a little bit more to understand what is preventing them from utilizing that space, because certainly we cannot enable or allow this to be happening. And if the whole fight is that there's no appropriate shelter space, well, define appropriate for me then, because maybe that's what I'm not understanding. So perhaps I need to have conversations with the county and better inform myself, but it is not making sense to me how we can enable dozens of encampments across the city living in this type of environment that has so many problematic issues with it. And yet we've now just created 180, whatever it was, 80 spaces that are not being filled. Like, this is just not okay, but I will rest my case there. Thank you.
Ms. James Reid.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. I just thought I'd add in that the trespass notices were given to the individuals, and the deadline was today at 4 o'clock. So you may see, and we can continue to report to council, we may see an uptake. It's our understanding we're having twice daily meetings with the county and service partners that people are packing their belongings. So we may see those numbers change, and they're getting, the county's prepared for that we may get a wave. So we will continue to update council on that.
I think if I can, Councillor Hamilton, I think it's like I share your frustration completely. The problem or the solution, however you look at it, both incorporate charter rights and freedoms. And, you know, freedom of mobility is one of those charter rights and freedoms. And so we as a body can look after our land, which requires a whole bunch of other things that you just heard from Mr. Prowse on. But what we can't do is legislate an end to homelessness. And it's a very, very difficult line to walk properly where you're abiding by the provincial regulations and laws and doing what we know is the right thing to do because of various interpretations of those charter rights and those laws via the judiciary. And so I think the point, if I can boil down to one thing that you kind of like made as a point that I think is really important, is the how do we let it get here? Well, like we didn't, actually we inherited this, and there's more down that route, right? But the idea that we can let it go from one tent in any location to 20 or 50 or 100, I think is quite frankly the lesson that needs to be learned by the county, by the city. And that's going to take continual breaking down of silos and continual cooperation to make sure it don't happen again. So I just want to highlight on that point of your question. I know it wasn't a statement, but it was a question. But anyway, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. You're totally reading my notes. That was more politely phrased than I could have said it. I'm still going to cover a little bit here on very much what you said, but I love the differentiation between one tent to this phenomenon occurring at this magnitude. That's what really grips me. I'm going to go very quickly to Mr. Prowse. And this is a tough file, Mr. Prowse, so I think you know that, and none of my comments are directed at you specifically. But there was something you said, and I don't want, at the risk of misquoting you, the county lacks the money and the something to prevent this from happening? Or could you just clarify on the language there? I know you didn't write it down exactly, but at least the sentiment when you were speaking to Council and Councillor Hamilton.
Sure. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales. I think I was speaking in absence of the county, and I indicated I think that they would tell you is they too lack the money to provide all of the services they'd like to provide, I think is what I was attempting to convey.
Perfect. And the reason I hone in on that, Mayor Nuttall, is this is not the opinion of the county, and this is just, in their absence. But if truly the county lacks the money, the resources, the systematic empowerment, basically the ability to have the system allow them to prevent this from happening, then the province needs to hear about this. I think this is a systematic, I don't care if it was last council, previous council, I don't care if I believe the people online that this has more or less been happening for decades, but it always was, Jimmy and Sally, who everybody kind of knew were there, and they kept to their own. So whether it's decades, whether it's 5 years, whether it's less, it doesn't matter. If there's breaking down of the system to the point where we get to this point, this is a systematic neglect of duty, not by us, not by the county, by the system, the systems. And I'm looking at the memo. What really concerns me, besides the hazardous garbage, are those propane tanks. That is an issue. We wouldn't allow that on our industrial sites. We wouldn't allow that for a developer. We wouldn't allow that for a resident, some of those really damaged propane tanks. And we are allowing this. So there is a safety component, there's a humanity component, there's an environmental component. This cannot happen again. And I actually think this is a very compelling case study for involuntary treatment laws. That's not up to us. That there's some sort of degree of advocacy. And I know that's complicated. Homelessness and treatment is not necessarily the same thing, even though there's a lot of overlap. But at what point, I've heard before, there's no point in giving somebody who's homeless, who doesn't have anything, a ticket. So you don't give them a ticket, and you don't give them a ticket. And then maybe homelessness becomes aggressive behavior sometimes becomes addiction. And at what point do you build a case to feed into involuntary treatment laws to get people the help and prevent this from happening? To your point, Mayor Nuttall, what's really frustrating is, and this is not you, it was the content. You didn't say anything happy, Mr. Prowse, but the content of what Mr. Prowse said is, we're at a point where, we couldn't overnight house the 60 to 100 people that were there. Fair enough, duh. The fact that we let it get that bad is why we couldn't, it was really tough to do anything about it. I'll say the elephant in the room. I think the collective we, not council, it was a weird way fortunate that the Ministry of the Environment had the ability to come forward with the order that they did. And that doesn't make me happy. That frustrates me that all the systems are so broken that people are not saying out loud that this technicality, that was a way for it to happen. So I'm looking at it from above and seeing if the county doesn't have resources, whether it's staff, whether it's money, whether it's deployment, if we don't have the ability to prevent propane tanks from indefinitely living broken, damaged, and either being a hazard to people or flat out leaking and polluting our land, and if we also can't necessarily, we don't have involuntary treatment laws yet in this province, but if we don't have the ability to have a paper trail, because homelessness is not necessarily addiction issues, then I think the province needs to look at this whole case, this example. I think, this is just my personal opinion, I can't direct that, but if they want to review our memos, review internal files, so that can maybe be dealt with appropriately, because again, the point of 60 to 80, 100 people couldn't be housed overnight, again, not saying this to Mr. Prowse, saying this is the situation. Well, duh. The fact that we let it get to that point scares me, Mayor Nuttall, because it means if another one of this size and magnitude is to happen again through the systems, not us, neglect of duty, it will take another technicality for it to be cleaned up again. So the less you address it, the harder it becomes to actually clean up, because now we're looking at capacity overnight that does not exist. And back to Mr. Prowse's point that he was discussing with Councillor Hamilton, and even the uptake on available beds is quite marginal. So there was a question initially there, but this is obviously, thank you for the leeway on this. This is a very comment heavy point. And again, I just want to clarify, this is not an opinion from me on any individual or specific entity. This is a systemic, I think, neglect of duties from all the systems and entities, and that's just because it seems like it's broken. So I really hope the county sees this as a case study to interpret legislation and eventually, laws, and eventually through the court system.
Thank you. Just a few things on that. I think that I need to put in perspective, and I think I probably should have said this before. One is that, not just what you've said, Councillor Morales, but overall. One is, we're talking about this like it's already done. It's not. It's happening daily. It's going to happen daily, as you heard, for months. So there's that. We're not there yet. We're not there yet to be able to take a 360 on everything that's occurred. We're not there yet. We don't even have information from the police yet as to why this entire site was set aside and investigated for, I don't know, 8-9 days, something like that. Yeah. And so there's a lot of things that are still happening now that are going to be pertinent to the eventual 360 review of what's occurred. There's some specific things that I have real issue with that I've shared with CAO Prowse and with Ms. James Reed about looking to partner organizations to respond. And I don't think those are conversations for today. And then there's the involuntary piece. You know, Dan Carter, I don't know if anyone knows Dan Carter or of him. He is the mayor of, he's going to kill me if I don't get this right, Oshawa? Okay, well, I heard that from our CAO, so if it's wrong, it was him. And Dan suffered from addictions, heavy addictions, and came back from it. And it was I think it was a third intervention by his family and friends. But one of the things that he always reminds me, I think I've actually heard the deputy mayor say this as well, is like involuntary treatment already exists. If you're using drugs and you are overdosing and somebody hits you with naloxone or a like drug to bring you back, you don't have consent to do that from the individual, unless they have a note written out there saying if I'm overdosing, bring me back. But I haven't seen that before. So there already are instances of involuntary treatment. The problem is our involuntary treatment is at a moment of time and doesn't go any further. And I've been advocating for this in our federal parliament, to our provincial legislatures. For 7 years ago, I wrote that report saying that's the way to go. And we're almost there, I think, in Ontario. We're not quite, but we're almost there. Until that comes, though, we're going to have the scenario that we're dealing with right now, 100 rooms. Maybe it goes to 25 out of 100 get used. We know once they get into that the county is very successful. They said 12 out of 16, 75%. But getting those individuals to accept, it's a rough road. So I think we're probably in for more of the same, even though we can sit here and say we don't want more of the same. And of course we don't. I think we're in for more of the same until that legislation changes, like you said. I think I saw Councillor Harris. Did you have?
Hey, thank you, Mayor Nuttall. And great questions and comments so far. Just through you, Mayor Nuttall, to CO Prowse. CO Prowse, thanks for the information. I appreciate the memo that we received earlier. Just curious, one thing that you mentioned, and I credit staff for having the thoughtfulness to engage the health unit. Can you give a little, I don't know if you gave a rationale as to why they didn't respond, or I don't know if I say that correctly, but didn't feel they had a role, or what that was about?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. Excuse me, I'll ask Rebecca James Reed to fill in the color, but my recollection was they did respond. We requested they come on site to investigate the nature of the site, given our concern for public safety. They declined, and told us we could send them drone footage, I think, and videos, and they would be happy to examine it. I'm not sure they gave a specific reason for them declining. Rebecca, do you know?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, they did indicate that they would wait and see the Ministry of the Environment to go on site first, and then they would like to speak with the inspector. And I did push back as acting CIO to say we were surprised that they weren't going to go on site, and we engaged Councillor Kungle as the chair as well. But maybe Mayor Nuttall would like to add more because he was involved as well.
In all honesty, Councillor, I think that that's an answer that needs to be fully answered another day. And until that point, I think, you know, I don't want to go anywhere with that. If you can accept that, that would be great.
Yeah, I can curb my curiosity. I was just curious, and I appreciate that they were called. I think that was a thoughtful addition to the effort to respond after hearing what the environment concerns were. So thank you for that. I'm just curious, and maybe again through you, Mayor Nuttall, to CEO Provost. This is the second, if I'm remembering correctly, significant encampment-related response we've been involved in, the last one being Barrie Park. And just curious, I know it's been stated, and I appreciate that the real, the activating piece of this intervention was the police interaction. And I suggest that's, in my recollection, somewhat different than the action that motivated the change at Barrie Park. I wonder if you give a little bit of a context so people understand the difference between the action that was initiated at Barrie, which I don't believe was necessarily because of a illegal something significant with police, or was it? But maybe I'm misremembering. So if you could maybe differentiate why those two responses.
Sure, happy to. Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. Your recollection is correct, Councillor Harris. Barrie Park was initiated by the city. Mr. Schmidt and his team meet with the county and the outreach workers, et cetera, as part of what I'll call a table. I think you meet every week or every 2 weeks. There is an ongoing list of encampments in the city. We're not unaware of them. What the team does is they effectively triage them, both from locational challenges. Is it near a school? Is it in an open park? Is it in an area that is going to cause concern over safety and things like that? Part of that discussion includes the county confirming that they have the capacity to take on the unhoused if we have to move them out in conjunction with the police. Barrie Park was a large encampment, but certainly not in the scope and scale of this encampment. But we were effective in getting the county to put together enough available, appropriate housing units, beds, and then the city worked to secure the park, given our legislative authority. So it's a different situation. That is typically how we do approach encampments. Most often, council doesn't hear about them because they are maybe 1 or 2 or up to 4 people. I think it's fair to say once we get beyond sort of half a dozen, it is problematic to get our service manager to confirm that there are enough available appropriate beds. I don't want to speak for Mr. Schmidt, but maybe you can just confirm that. I think that sort of has been our experience. Beyond half a dozen sort of becomes a hill too high. So smaller encampments we tackle, certainly ones that are right in front of the public. We tackle. It's usually a onesie twosie. The larger ones become much more complex, but for sure, Barrie Park was initiated by the city as part of our protocol, and this was not. This was initiated after the police secured the site.
Great, thank you. Just maybe along that theme, I'm curious, and I think most of us know, and those of us who have connection to that area, it's not in Ward 8, but I have a lot of connection to those who may have businesses in the area, and I know, I'm sure Councillor Nixon's had a number of calls over the years. Was the site an area of concern for Barrie Police Services? Was it a hot spot or a harm spot based on their calls for service and concerns? Was it on their radar?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Harris. I don't want to speak for the police. I don't believe so. It was not considered what I'll say a hotspot from our perspective because it was not in close proximity to schools. It was, back from the streets, et cetera. So I would say from the city's sort of triaging of it, it was not considered a hotspot in that regard. And because of the size of it, it just became something that, until we could confirm available beds, we couldn't tackle.
Okay, thank you. And maybe one other question. I think, given where it was, and as we see the overheads, and you can see the pond and the streams, the creek, is there, as we look forward, and I think Councillor Hamilton had kind of touched on this, that look forward, the lessons and the opportunities to avoid something like this in the future. Environmentally sensitive areas. Now, I know this is considered that, but clearly it's an environmentally impacted area. Is that something that, again, I know there's the competing rights and responsibilities around encampments and people being able to be on public lands. Are we precedent setting here, or is there some other areas that have gone through this where the really significantly sensitive areas are impacted and have to be dealt with? Are we new into this area, or has somebody else experienced this?
Sorry, Councillor Harris, I was looking around to see if somebody wanted to jump in on that. I think I'm going to venture that this is uncharted territory. This was an exceptionally unique situation. Multiple service providers, multiple, the ministry, the health unit, the city, the service manager through the county, and all of their tangential providers. So I think I would go out on a limb and say this is probably a pretty unique situation. I don't believe, subject to pretending I'm a lawyer, I don't believe there's a delineation between environmentally protected land owned by the municipality and land owned by the municipality, which I think was part of your question there. Is there sort of a sensitivity meter that we can utilize? At this point, I believe there is not. We are doing additional work around that at the mayor's request. He's asked us to investigate, what are the thresholds that could trigger something like this before it gets to be something like this. So that work is underway, and I hope to report back to the mayor and council at some point on that.
Thank you, and thank you, Mayor Nuttall, for initiating that part of the kind of the go forward. I think that's really important. And you mentioned about some of the metrics that you use or measures that you use to kind of for intervention, and this is not one of those allowable kind of considerations. So we'll be curious to see where that lands. Just maybe one final question. Is there any requirement from council to request or a investigation, or is this of how this got to where it got to and the go forward?
Sorry,
Sorry,
you're asking great questions.
Okay.
You're asking great questions. I'm going to ask you to hold that one off because those conversations are happening. And it's not at a request from this table, meaning that likely we won't have a choice.
Thank you very much. I'm done. No further questions. Thank you, Mayor Nuttall.
Before we go to Councillor Reitman, then back over to Councillor Hamilton, because I had Councillor Reitman first there. I have a couple of questions, and these are for more to make a point than they are anything else. Firstly, how many tests of the water have been completed by the Simcoe health unit? Like, we get these tests done down at Kempenfelt Beach, tests at Johnson. Is that the health unit? Okay, how many of those have been done there?
Mayor Nuttall, are you referring to like beach sampling tests throughout the summer?
Yeah, it's actually water sampling tests at a beach. Yeah.
Vala may have more information, but I think they do that on a regular daily basis, and then we get the beach closure notices that come out from the health unit.
Yeah. Okay, so we do those daily. How many have been done at this site by the health unit?
Mayor Nuttall, I'm not sure we know that, but I would probably venture none.
Okay.
Certainly not in recent history.
And where does the water go from this site?
I'm not a hydrogeologist, but I think it drains. I think it drains into Kempenfeld Bay, Mayor Nuttall.
Like right beside the beach.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay, so we've had beach closures happening down at the beach because of high levels of what?
This is the interactive part. E. coli, Mayor Nuttall.
Coli.
I'll just leave my mic on.
And like, maybe I'm stretching here, but maybe I'm not, which is when you have 100 people using a washroom into a creek that's going to our beach, and you have high E. coli at the beach, at what point do you go, let's go figure out what's happening? This is an issue. And the issue like actually stops there for the public in the sense that, oh, you know, go to the beach or don't go to the beach, right? But it doesn't stop there for council, because each one of you and I got training on water quality, of drinking water quality, and we are held liable after Walkerton, right? It's like I heard one thing. You stole that from me. Actually, you didn't. You said it before me. It's like the one thing you can be held liable for around this table personally, right? Where indemnification doesn't matter, but water quality standards supersede everything. And this has been left for years. And that cannot happen. And so to the point that Mr. Prowse was making about like, well, what are the circumstances that we can then go look at the water quality? Like, I don't think testing the water is actually the City of Barrie's job. I think that's actually the health unit's job. But if we got to start doing it to cover off this group of people that's elected, whether it's this council or the next council or council after that, like, I'm all for spending the dough to do that, because it not only keeps the water safe, but it also keeps us safe as directors of a corporation that runs a water supply. And you know, thank God we have such a great system over there at the water treatment plant, or is that what we call it? Surface water treatment plant, that's giving us by the second or every 2-second data. But imagine for a second that thing went down, right? And we've got to switch back to a complete well system for the city. Like, are you folks comfortable? Because I'm not. Like, just being honest. So I think that there's a wide range of things that need to be understood, investigated, and reported back on to make sure that we don't miss the entire point of what we're going through here, and then have this issue down the road in a more severe way than we're experiencing today. And it may be that the pollution control, I think we call it the Pollution Control Center, it may be that, you know, there was a lot of stuff going there and that was the source of any readings down at the beach that were no good. Or it may be because the creek goes out there and you got 100 people that have a system that's not a system, right? So I think it's all of these things need to be figured out in a very comprehensive way going forward, so we do not end up here again. Councillor Rietma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I very much agree with what you've just said, and I think it leads into the bigger picture question. And I know it was asked here, what lessons have we learned? How did we get here? And I think it's a systematic issue getting here, and what we're doing, because this is not the only encampment we have in the city, what we're doing here is slapping a Band-Aid on a problem that is not only Barrie's, but it's every municipality in all of Canada, really. And I want to go back to about 1990-ish, when before that time, the federal government and the provincial government had a program, and I think it involved municipalities, whereby they built housing, rent geared to income. And that took care of, you know, a lot of people who were at the very bottom of the income scale. And in 1990, both the federal government and the provincial government got out of that business. And you don't notice the problem a year or two later. But 35 years later, That's where our problem comes from. And we're going to AMO this week or next week. And I would really like us to have a discussion with our provincial friends and our federal friends to get back into rent geared to income housing, because I think that that is really the start of solving this problem. Now, it doesn't solve addictions and all those kind of things, but at least we will have accommodation for these people before they end up getting thrown out onto the street and living rough. And I think if we can stop that, then I think we're getting somewhere. But in the interim, if we don't start building rent geared to income housing, I'm afraid we're just going to have this problem forever, and we're just going to be slapping Band-Aids on it and not solving it. My comments.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hamilton.
You actually took my Mayor Nuttall, but I did think of one more. I'm just wondering if the uptake for the existing shelter spaces that were made available is slim, 6, and I know people are packing up and maybe we'll get another half dozen or dozen. Is there an opportunity to approach other encampments in areas that we know are highly utilized by the unhoused right now to make those shelter spaces available to them?
Through your Mayor Nuttall to Councillor Hamilton. Yes, the county outreach service providers are doing that. Particularly, you may have seen an uptake in more people at Busby and across the street at the courthouse. So their outreach team has been there because when the police first evacuated the first site, it appeared that many people went to the Busby location. So they are there and trying to encourage people to come to the shelter spaces. I just don't have the information as to how many are involved in that.
Okay. And is part of the city's interaction with the county to understand when people are responding no to uptaking the shelter spaces? Are we trying to get understand of why they're not?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to be very frank, right now we're not in lessons learned. We're just doing like hour to hour running, kind of managing the situation. But I do think that will come after.
Okay. And I would hope too, as part of your investigation, that you mentioned CAO Prowse and looking at the Charter of Rights and whether or not that supersedes environmental laws, public health laws. Like, I hope we're going to get to that point, because I guess I'm a little bit muddied here in terms of how we keep referring to the Charters of Rights. We can't do anything, but there's a lot of other laws out there that are being thrown by the wayside that is enabling a lot of this living. So I would love to really understand at what point do we look at some of these laws at play and the impact to other citizens that live in this city, and how does that all come together? So not for today, but I do hope that's part of the investigation that you referred to.
I have Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Maybe comments and then a question. So just reference to the health unit and those types of pieces, I would say, and also, if I may, to Ms. James Reed's kind of commentary that we are in an active situation. I think there's lots to kind of debrief on in general around understanding jurisdiction and roles and scope. That's quite welcome in that, and also an evolving situation. I didn't even know we had a water system that was that vulnerable in that location. So the bigger question too, when we get into debriefing, is maybe some overall pictures that would be helpful, which is just what is our ability to protect any and all wellheads, and do we know where they're located in the city, and is there certain jurisdictions around getting some type of protectionistic spacing from those for anything? And so not to kind of stigmatize what's happening or that, we don't have facts to talk about cause and effect around water quality and that, but I think without the health unit being here at an operation level, I think, I'll share back questions, but sure that when we're ready for a debrief or better understanding about generally where do you test, how often, what would the likelihood be, or what do we know about that space. But in general too, I think it would be good information for us to have on the liability from a waterway, water quality. It might just be, where else do we have wellheads or waterways that are in green spaces that may or may not be restricted, and do we care to do that in some way?
It's a great point. And before we go to Mr. Prowse, I do want to say there was immediate response and action as soon as Councillor Kungle was brought into the equation. So I just want to point that out. I know you don't necessarily care about that, but it should be known, should be known. And thank you for that. Over to Ms. Prowse.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall, and I appreciate Councillor Kungol's comments. I just wanted to clarify and hopefully delineate. Your commentary was around the stream that runs from this area to Kempenfelt Bay. The issue of an active wellhead, if it was at risk or in jeopardy, the city would deal with it immediately. Have no question about that. There was not an active wellhead in this area that was unprotected or unsecured. Your staff is very professional, and they would never allow that to happen knowingly. Your question specifically was around the stream leading to the Kempenfelt Bay, which is, as I understand, not measured or tested, to your point.
Yeah, the point on the wellhead was if we ever needed to bring it back because our main water system went down, what do you do to do that, right? You're going to be in the scenario where you've got to actually do the same thing we're doing right now. So, water redundancy is an incredibly valuable thing to have for the city of Barrie. And not just valuable as a resource, but like valuable in case. And I would question whether we actually have it fully right now, because that isn't the only wellhead. I think there's other ones. Like we've had other requests where we've said, no, we can't sell a piece of land because there's a wellhead on the piece of property. And so they do keep track. I think maybe between between Mr. Prowse and between Bala, they'll be able to get a list and make sure that there's no co-location between encampments and wellheads.
Thank you, and if I may, thank you, CEO Prowse, for the clarification. I think it's a good discussion, but on that too is around then how do we do that? So if we restrict it, or it'd be good even as a general information session to say what are our backup plans, like how vulnerable are we should some things deteriorate or be compromised, and then two, the waterways or streams around in general, high likelihood of public access. So do we have a risk framework around likelihood of contamination or use, and then again proximity to activity that we know might occur. And then if we need to, how do we create a boundary of restriction there that's appropriate and respectful and clear to the public? Yeah, but my other comments would just be thank you, because I'm not in the full picture, nor do I need to be. Of course, you pulled in where you need to be, but definitely have viewed this to be something where just want to say thank you to those involved in this. I know I am getting calls because of a relationship effect into Ward 3. Everyone is very positive about it, got positive feedback about how things are happening, but definitely want to just say how pleased I am about the compassionate and very professional approach taken with this, and also very mindful. So it is a dynamic, very complex situation, and I would just say thank you to those that probably spent their weekend on an evolving situation to make sure people are cared for through the situation.
Thank you. Mr. Morales, Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Nuttall. Councillor Hamilton, your comment really resonated with me, which was there's probably so many little laws and bylaws that are being broken and ignored as they're broken that contribute towards this. And so here's a question, Mr. Prowse, is it within staff's purview? And staff is big on this one. Staff can be yourself, one of the general managers. And I guess for now, I'll have you maybe opine on Barrie Police and Barrie Fire. Is it within staff's purview, or do you need direction, an internal investigation before that, or even some sort of intake forms and a potential budget to loop this space into very frequent, I don't want to say daily, but definitely more than once a week, very frequent monitoring? And I mean that from different prongs. Monitoring from a Barrie Fire perspective. So that in itself, you're not Barrie Fire, but that in itself would address a lot of the propane, possibly hazardous chemicals materials that led to a lot of the Ministry of Environment things. From a Barrie Police, I'm not going to pretend to know police operations, but there's a point where they go like, okay, this isn't just being homeless. This reaches a potential watershed moment. And then from a Barrie bylaw property management, I guess, enforcement perspective of, somebody, sitting there for a couple of days doing their thing is one thing versus, I believe in the memo, is that a boat or a pool? I'm not being sarcastic. That is an extremely large item. And so, we get to a point where in 5 years, we don't have to spend another large, possibly 7-figure sum. So is this something that could be looped into, we're not there yet, we're not doing 360s, but once we get to a point where we either fully clean it up or materially clean it up, can they be looped into, for example, I know that bylaw has 4 zones. That's as basic as I know. They have 4 zones and they schedule it and they do their thing. I don't know how Barrie Fire and Barrie Police operate their logistics, but is there a way that this space can be looped into? Because this is gonna need, if not daily, very frequent enforcement. Otherwise, it's going to keep happening again.
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councillor Morales, I think all things are possible. Certainly, if money's not an issue, all things are possible. We're going to have some time on this. This will be, I think, we will have this site secured, additional sites secured in the area, 4 months, and we will report back to council, and there will be significant implications financially for the corporation of the city of Barrie. And out of that will come some recommendations, I would imagine. In the short term, daily inspections, security, all of the things you can imagine are going to be in place as we attempt to wrestle back control of this area. Moving forward, it's a broader discussion for council. This is not the only area, it's not the only encampment, and it won't be the only area, and it won't be the only encampment. How we deal with that will be expensive and challenging. So I would look forward to further conversations around that, but there is securing this site forever and ever is great. It's not the only site, and we will have this discussion, I would imagine, on additional sites in the city of Barrie. So all that to say, more to come, but I would agree with you. Additional due diligence around these sites would be advantageous. How we deal with them legally in a manner that is effective. You mentioned propane tanks, et cetera. Without belaboring the conversation, then you have to ask yourself, well, what if you find somebody with a propane tank? We send security, we can't take it away from them. So what do we do with it? We can potentially deal with an encampment if it reappears on the property, but there are layers of legality here, and not to make council's head bleed from this, but these are the types of issues that we've gone through even just in the last week and a half. The layers of, hey, it just makes sense. Why don't you do X? And you go, yeah, wish we could. So these are complex situations. I agree with your sentiment and look forward to further conversation around this because I think we are all concerned about the outcome.
And very quick follow-up. I appreciate you pointing out my sentiment. I think in discussions like this for anyone, it's easy to confuse sentiment, intent, malice, all that stuff. So at the end of the day, it's good to just take a step back. Everybody wants good outcomes, not just for the park, the people. But would it be fair to, will council expect, so once you get to that point, that you go, okay, we can do this internally, there's no cost impact. So I don't know the routes, but let's say one of the 3 that I listed can have one of existing staff just do a loop, send 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and there's no impact to the budget. But the other 2 do have one. When that memo or email or report, whatever it is that comes back, will we have that kind of like flavor thing going? If council wants to do nothing else, then this is the cost. If you want to do flavor 1, if you want to patrol it forever and ever and ever, just so council can have that. I always like looking at those options, but even to Mayor Nuttall's comments, and I'm not saying this out of place of motivating out of fear, but in addition to the very painful human cost to this whole situation, there's a legality situation to water pollution. So I think it's, as a member of council, I'm not speaking for everyone else, I would like having that being very clearly outlined to me, because otherwise one of us has to move an item for discussion asking for it, because not just because we have the discussion now, but because the Ministry of Environment had to show up. And so if it potentially happens a second time and things get complicated, the onus is like, what did they do differently? What did they try? If we decide not to go for the full flavor, that's fine. But I'm wondering, I'm not asking you to commit to numbers or outcomes, but would it be fair that council would expect in some sort of report back, whenever and however that may look, the different flavors of options?
Through you, Mayor Nuttall, to Councilor Morales, I think the short answer is no. Council should expect from us a report on the cost, the implications, lesson learned, as we always do. I think envisioning a policing of the city, if you will, is probably not something council should expect. So I think when that report comes back, if council wants additional information, that would be an appropriate time to ask us to go back and report on it. But again, we are still very early in the dealing with it stage. We're not even at the recovery stage, nor are we at the lessons learned stage, and that will certainly come.
Very quickly to clarify, at no point did I say policing of the city, Mr. Prowse, a site management of this location. And I understand that I'm thinking very narrow scope, because this in 2 months can happen. I'm not even going to say a name of a location. I understand that. I understand it can be a very whack-a-mole situation, but that would be like asking you to give us a report on how do we ensure 100% satisfaction from every taxpayer. Okay, but on this one specifically, because it has happened, because it's been identified, and because we have a Ministry of Environment with various requests, mandates, and orders, I'm not trying to paint you into a corner, but could it be that we would get something more specific about the situation without bleeding into the how do we do this everywhere at all times?
Sorry, I'm just going to jump in. So, Councilor Morales, we're going to be live on this location probably till the snow hits. So, I think there'll be a report back prior to that on what the implications have been to date. That we can then, if we're looking for an increase in service delivery over to this location specifically. But I'll be frank, we've already started implementing changes. Like, there's a fence there. That fence is not permanent. Maybe it should be, right? Like, a fence also doesn't stop a person from cutting it or hopping over it or going under it or whatever people do, right? So you still have to have the other piece. But like, I think that all needs to come back through staff on what their lessons learned are, what are the move forwards. And then if we want to make changes to the recommendations at that point, I think we do that. I'm going to cut it off right now, if that's okay. And I want to just share one piece with everyone. My gut is based on the conversations we've had, because I'm struggling to explain to other levels of government how we got here. And my gut is that we should do some sort of outside report on this. I can tell you that the team at the City of Barrie does not want to have these encampments set up on City of Barrie lands. This is not a new thing. This has been consistent. We've consistently been asking for the adequate amount of rooms and the adequate amount of space and the adequate amount of support structures to be in place from both the province and from the service manager. And to me, they're one and the same, because one oversees the other and the other one's the delivery unit on the ground. So from where I'm sitting, I think that we should proceed with a report. My gut is that we will go and get a public health professional to do said report, and that we should, have conversations internally. So those are conversations I'm going to be having with our CAO over the next little while. I'm not going to start those conversations until I know 100% we have direction on everything moving in the right way, because I don't want to take resources from the response. Okay, but at some point, I'm indicating to you here now that there's going to need to be a budget to do a review and a report back on how this doesn't unfold like this ever again. And I don't want it to be taking away from the folks who are doing the things that they're doing that we've already asked them to do. I think we're not even we don't have the person power to take that on, nor do I believe that we have the professional experts to take that on. And that means it's going to cost money, and that means we use the C word, which is consultant, to do that. But I think that that's a very, very, very good thing to come back with in the months to come, to protect the city, to protect the drinking water, and to protect ourselves going forward.